The Philadelphia 76ers are currently the second seed in the Eastern Conference with a 9-3 record. After a very drama-filled offseason surrounding the James Harden sweepstakes, it seemed like this team was going to bottom out or just be a complete disaster in some capacity or another. That's what a lot of people expected, including myself, for quite a while. But somehow, after losing their second best player for pretty much pennies on the dollar, this team looks significantly better. And I think there is a very important lesson to be learned from that in terms of roster construction and what actually makes an NBA team good. So let's talk about it. Before I get into today's video, I want to talk about our sponsor, RAYCON. Odds are you've heard of RAYCON before, as they have made a name for themselves in the premium audio world with their everyday earbuds and everyday headphones, earning tens of thousands of 5-star reviews along the way. I got my RAYCONs at a pretty convenient time as I was moving and my previous earbuds just stopped working out of the blue, and I was immediately impressed with the quality across the board, especially with the price in mind. They also fit my ears really well, which has been a problem with me for other brands in the past, and even when I was moving around quite a bit. Like, I've taken these things to the gym to shoot around a handful of times and they have yet to fall out. RAYCON also has a new line of RAYCON Home and RAYCON PowerTech products, including a Magic 180 charging cable, as well as a faucet filter. And now is the perfect time to get some RAYCONs, as you can get a little bit ahead on some holiday shopping, as RAYCON is having an early Black Friday sale. Go to buyraycon.com/rusty to get 20 to 50% off of their products site-wide. Again, that is buyraycon.com/rusty. Get yourself or a loved one some great headphones. They're a really good product. It's a great way to support this channel. Thank you to RAYCON for sponsoring this video. So the concept that I want to explore today is addition by subtraction. The idea that simply removing a player from a team is going to make said team notably better, even if that player is, at least in theory, a very good one. I realize the tendency to bash on James Harden and just suggest he's completely bad is one that, well, it's tempting. I don't think that's a fair way to actually analyze this, so let's just at least be reasonable about how good James Harden actually is. He's a 21 and 11 assist all-star caliber guy, one of the better three-point shooters of all time, at least off of the dribble. Excellent playmaker, and while he's not quite the scorer he used to be, still a pretty damn good one, and without a doubt, he was Philadelphia's second best player last year, and he's gone, and they're better. So how does that happen? Let's take a look where this impact has been most obviously significant, and that is in the production of Tyrese Maxey. Maxey has been unbelievably good this year. He is averaging 27 and 7 on excellent efficiency, shooting 43% from 3 on 7.5 attempts per game, having over a 61% true shooting percentage. Now, this boost in production is mainly just due to the fact that he's getting 4 more shots per game that previously would have gone to James Harden. However, it's not just as simple as those field goal attempts, but rather the context in which Maxey is getting those field goal attempts. The Sixers are doing a much better job at putting Maxey in the best place for him to succeed, and for him, he is at his best in the open court, running down the floor, being faster than everyone else on the floor, even with the ball in his hands. But last year, most of the time, after the opponent shoots the ball and Embiid or whoever comes down with the rebound, even if Maxey is trailing up court, if they don't hit that pass, the ball is just going to go to James Harden. James is going to walk it up, and the Sixers are going to settle into a half-court possession, which is notably far less efficient than a fast break opportunity, especially with someone as good in the break as Tyrese Maxey is. So this was kind of putting Maxey back in terms of actually being at his best. He wasn't able to use his best skill set nearly as frequently as he has been this year. Maxey, of course, is also getting more opportunities as a playmaker as he has the ball in his hands more, and this is an area that Maxey has been criticized for in the past as not actually being all that that great of a playmaker, and he's up to 7 assists per game this year. Now, I would not necessarily say that that means he's a really good playmaker, because I don't think he's quite in that territory, but it's also worth mentioning that it's gonna be hard to look like a great playmaker if you're playing next to someone who's already averaging 11 assists per game. There's only so many assists to go around, and if you have one player essentially hogging all of them, well, you know, you're not going to look that great at playmaking. And MAXEY has proven at this point that he is a more than serviceable lead playmaker. Maybe not the ideal lead playmaker, but because he's such a good scorer, he's able to use that to his advantage to leverage opportunities for his teammates. Overall, definitely a big leap from Tyrese Maxey, thanks to James Harden no longer being there. The other guy who's really benefited in the playmaking department specifically has been Joel Embiid. Joel has always flashed playmaking abilities, and at least in the regular season, very often shown an ability to make a competent skip pass across the court whenever there's help making the right read. Generally does a decent job of it. However, he's never really been utilized as a playmaking hub, a big man on the elbow who can just make passes to cutters, to shooters, maybe set up a handoff for MAXEY, which is an action they run quite a bit, things of that nature. And since they've been doing that this year, again, because they do have a playmaking gap that they have to make up for with James being gone, he's up to 6 assists per game. And I've also noticed that he's just been simply making better and quicker decisions with the ball in his hands. He's also been making riskier decisions, which in this context is for the better, because there is a degree of not being willing to take risks that you can have as a playmaker that ultimately limits your offense because you're too afraid to turn the ball over. In the past, though, Joel Embiid has dealt with this issue, specifically dealing with double teams whenever he is in the post. And this year, obviously it's the regular season, so it's not going to happen as frequently as it does in the postseason, but he's done a much better job of making those decisions quick, getting the ball out of his hands quick, and not getting himself into deep coverage and deep trouble. That's really been the main difference between Embiid and Nikola Jokic, really just the most significant one, because they're both dominant one-on-one post scorers. There's really no one who's going to stop those guys one-on-one. However, when another defender comes, Nikola Jokic is just going to hit an absolute dime, and Embiid, more often than not, at least in a postseason setting, is going to either turn the ball over or throw a bad pass that results in a bad shot. So, if this is a sign that weakness of Embiid is rather going to turn more and more into a strength as the year goes along, just with him having more reps as a lead playmaker, that's going to make him all the more effective in the postseason, which is of course a big concern for Joel Embiid given his lack of effectiveness in the postseason in years previous. Obviously, he's not ever going to be as good at passing the ball as Nikola Jokic is, but at the very least, he is putting himself in the position to succeed and doing a good job of it, and hopefully limiting what was previously a weakness for him. Ultimately, by losing James, I think you've made your best player better and more versatile, and I think you've made what was previously your third best player now probably better than James even was in Philadelphia. You have a higher scoring presence, and while he's not necessarily setting the world on fire with his playmaking, by having both Embiid and MAXEY doing a good job of sharing that distribution, they're getting the job done overall to still be a plenty good playmaking team. It's also worth mentioning that a lot of this has been the scheming of Nick Nurse, and I gotta say, Nick Nurse is a head coach who, in years previous, I was not the biggest fan of, not really the biggest believer in, someone who I thought was fairly overrated. However, I have to say that he has done an excellent job with this team, and he's been a big part of why MAXEY and Embiid have succeeded. He looked at the pretty gaping hole that existed in terms of offensive production as soon as James Harden is gone, both in the scoring and playmaking department, and managed to have both of those guys take on that responsibility without it being like seeming like one player was being asked to do too much, which is a difficult balance to strike for sure, especially when you're talking about that big of a talent void. But the other big thing for me personally, the way that I feel about this Sixers team, is it all comes down to the playmaking. It's something that I have talked about ad nauseum, not just in this video because I've talked about playmaking plenty to this point, but also just my overall personal personal beliefs as to what is actually successful in an NBA setting, what actually works for an NBA offense. And I think when you have someone like James Harden being so solely responsible for your team's playmaking, averaging 11 assists per game, it makes your offense a little bit too simplistic, makes it a little bit too easy to read, and it makes it all the easier to just take it apart in a postseason setting, especially if you're facing a very talented, versatile, and intelligent defense like the Boston Celtics in round 2. I just generally dislike, there are exceptions, like I fucking love Tyrese Halliburton, but I generally dislike playmakers averaging 10 assists or more per game, because historically, a team that has that kind of offensive scheme where one guy is dominating the playmaking to that degree, those teams do not succeed in a postseason setting, at least as far as actually winning a title, because throughout NBA history, only 2 players have averaged 10 assists per game on their team in the regular season and won a title that way for their team. And that was Magic Johnson multiple times and LeBron James once in 2020. Otherwise, that shit does not happen, and a not nearly as good as peak James Harden being the guy who is doing that, it ultimately limited Philadelphia's offense. It was a little too simple, and it was definitely too slowly paced. Getting MAXEY out in the open court, really maximizing him in that ability, it just makes the offense for Philly so much easier. There's so much easy opportunity happening now that was not happening with the previous guy slowing the ball down and making everything a half-court possession. I don't think all of this is James Harden's fault. I think they definitely could have done more to add some versatility to the offensive scheme, but with James gone, I think that versatility is finally here. I think Philadelphia's offense will be far less easy to just dissect in a postseason setting, and I think they're going to be better for it. Now, that then begs the question, how confident am I in their overall success in this upcoming postseason? You know, do they potentially stand a chance against the Bucks or the Boston Celtics? Well, the Bucks, while their record has been good and they are the 3rd seed in the conference, they are still standing on some fairly shaky grounds right now. So I think there's a chance they could be better than Milwaukee. Boston is the only team right now where I'm just like, I just don't know if there's any freaking way, because they look so good. So good. But the real positive here with all of this for the Sixers is that going into this offseason, they will have a max spot. They will be able to sign any player that they want to a full contract without having to make any kind of sign and trade type deal, which has become increasingly more common in the NBA. A player like Paul George, for example, would be awesome. Kawhi Leonard, that would be hilarious. But I think you can land a genuinely very good player, have that guy be your 3rd, maybe 2nd guy, depending on how good that player ends up being, and you can go into next season and truly be able to compete with the Bucks or the Celtics, depending on who that player may be. I do think they're still ultimately at a little bit of a talent deficit by comparison to these teams, but they have done the absolute best to maximize what they have. And yeah, I thought they'd be better without James as I got into the season, but initially my reaction was, this is a disaster and we're just waiting for this team to blow it up. They definitely turned the tides in that regard, and yeah, Sixers look good. That's the ultimate point. Anyways, with that said, shout out to Rudy for editing this video, and goodbye.